So, there's plenty of chapels around here.
Yeah, waiting for people to come back.
Absolutely.
And we hope and pray that things will resume very quickly. And we're actually hearing from tour agents in America and other places that people are just waiting for the skies to open up again, to return. So we're looking forward to the fall. In September, that's when we're gonna see many pilgrims coming back to the land. So as we continue our journey this way, in the Gospel of John chapter 19 in verse 41, John tells us that in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. According to the description that we see in the Gospel of John, the place of the crucifixion and the tomb of this wealthy, influential follower of Jesus Christ by the name of Joseph of Arimathea, according to John, those two places were in a close proximity. In fact, in verse 42, in the following verse, we see that the proximity of the tomb in relation to the place of the crucifixion was one of the reasons why Joseph of Arimathea is moved to use his family tomb for the burial of Jesus. John says that it was because of the day of preparation of the feast of the Jews, and because that tomb was nearby, that they placed him there, talking about the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Now, John also explains that in the property where the tomb was, there was a garden. And in this property, we have archaeological evidence for a garden from the Roman era.
When we talk about gardens, it's not a garden like we see today, just
concept of gardens.
It's a working garden.
Exactly. It's an agricultural garden. Like the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, in fact, when you guys go to see the Garden of Gethsemane, the name Gethsemane or Gachmanim or Gachemim, was a garden that was used to produce olive oil. Okay, and here we have also a gun. The term gun is normally in reference to a garden that was used for agriculture. And in this place, we have archaeological evidence for a garden from the Roman era. Now, back in the 1920s, and if you follow me this way, back in the 1920s, when people continued the excavations in this area right by the tomb, they uncovered in this place an ancient wine press, or a yekev, or
gat.
Now, in ancient times, the term gat was also used in reference to wine, but one common terminology that people would use to refer to the actual wine press was yekev, because it was the place for the production, but also it was associated with the place of storage as well. In modern times, people use the term yekev to refer to the wine cellar, right? Now, but the actual press or the actual place or the vat was known as the yekev. Now, in this location over here, we see only part of the wine press. Okay, the wine press originally is made up of two levels or two tiers. Okay, the upper tier or the treading floor or the mishtach dricha is still buried somewhere underneath the platform. Okay, and that the Garden Tomb is yet to do more excavations here in order to bring it to light. So from the upper tier or the treading floor, the Jews will run down to this lower tier, which is the collecting vat. Okay. Now, according to different archaeologists and experts when it comes to wine presses from different periods here in the land of Israel, they believe that the wine or the juice or the must was left at both levels at different periods for the fermentation process, for the production of wine. And then the final product was collected from the pit that you see down there, okay? and then the final product was put in wine skins. And the discovery of this wine press was significant for the place because it tells us that the place was used as a garden, more specifically a vineyard in ancient times. And it also speaks of wealth. In ancient times, the production of wine, just like today, the production of wine was associated with wealthy people.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But something else that is very interesting that, maybe you could incorporate in your future
Absolutely. Absolutely.
teachings is the fact that olives
Uh-huh.
can be transported from one place to another easily. I mean, you
Yes.
just pile them up
That's
in a
right.
bag, and they don't crush themselves unless there's a lot of weight on them.
That's right. That's right.
Grapes, you cannot. Grapes are damaged.
That's right.
So the production is usually very close to where they are pressed.
That's right. What a great point. And that is true. It is absolutely true.
So
In
there,
order to keep it fresh and to have a good,
but
flavor.
but only also to transport. You cannot load it on the back of a camel because it would all crush itself and you would lose it in the process of transporting.
That's right. That's right. Wow. That's a really good point.
And something else,
Yeah.
they would back then when they pressed the grapes,
Yeah.
they would do it barefoot.
That's right.
And the reason they did it barefoot was to not crush the pits
That's right.
because
To
the
make it
pit because it makes it bitter, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right, and that is a really good point. And also, I think also another reason that this is the reason why they will put straw at the bottom normally, in order to provide that cushion, so that they will not crush it. But also maybe having bare feet added extra flavor to the wine.
Especially if they didn't wash them. It was the yeast that helped ferment.
Maybe that contributed to the fermentation process.
Absolutely.
So, this is the wine press right here, but the most important and the most critical element here is the tomb that you see over here. And the tomb that you see over here was discovered back in 1867. And it is the tomb of a wealthy Jewish family. Now that we can say for sure, but because of the structure of the tomb, because of the content of this property, but also the location of this property in relation to the city. This would have been a prime piece of real estate in ancient times. Now, of course, people, when it comes to the age of the tomb, have debated over the years. Some people suggested that this tomb is from the time of the First Temple period because of the similarity of the layout of the tomb to the tombs that have been found in the area of the village or the area of the Ketef Hinnom, where archaeologists have excavated and found ancient tombs that can be accurately dated to the time of the First Temple period. Some people suggested that the tomb is maybe from the Hellenistic period, from the 4th century. Some archaeologists have cross-referenced the layout of this tomb with Jewish tombs that have been found in Alexandria, Egypt, that can also be accurately dated all the way back to the Hellenistic period in the 4th century BC. And then there are those who claim that maybe this was the tomb of the tomb of the 1st century because of the styles that were introduced in the Hellenistic period carried on during the all the way to the time of the 1st century. For instance, the use of gluskamot, okay? The use of ossuaries, okay? Now, these are replicas over here. We know that during the time of the Second Temple period, the burial style was modified, was changed. And it already started during the Hellenistic period with the introduction of these ossuaries. People would leave the body inside the tomb for a year or so, And after a year, the family will return to the tomb to remove the bones of the body. And then they will put the bones of the individual in a stone box known as the ossuary.
In fact, the ossuaries,
Yeah.
ossuaries, because os is hueso,
Yes, exactly.
bone. So the ossuaries were, first of all, custom made
Uh-huh.
to the size of the femur.
That's right. That's
And the
right.
size of the femur, because the femur is the largest
longest,
bone
yeah.
in the country, in the body. So if the femur fits, so will everything else.
That's right.
And it's important that the bones are not broken,
That's
because
right.
in
Psalm 34.
yes, but not only in Psalm 34, also in Ezekiel, the prophecy of
the dry bones.
of the dry bones prophecy.
Yeah.
It says that in the end of days, all old skeletons will reincarnate and come back to life.
Yeah.
And that's why it was imperative
Yeah.
that when Jesus was buried, that no bone was broken in his body
That's right.
prior to his death, which is why, the Romans usually would come and break the legs of the condemned so as to hurry up the process of dying.
That's right.
But Jesus on the cross actually died before they broke his legs.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And something else later on, when they would take the body from where it was laid to rest after about a year or so,
Yeah.
and fold it into the ossuaries, they would take the ossuaries and they would place it in a family burial estate,
That's right.
the entire family.
Yeah.
And so somebody would be gathered onto his ancestors.
That's right.
Okay, so he would be brought to rest together
reunite the family.
with his ancestors.
That's right. Wow.
Ne'esaf el avotav.
Nachon. Yes. And that's a phrase that you see repeated in the Old Testament.
Correct.
It came to the patriarchs.
Right.
And all those who were buried afterwards, and he was gathered unto
His
fathers.
ancestors.
Yeah. Amazing. So, the tomb. So, we talked about the three schools of thought when it comes to the age of the tomb. But what does the Bible actually say about the tomb? Because people talk about the tomb. In John chapter 19, verse 41 says that it was a brand new tomb, or a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. But in the Greek, in the original, there are two terms for new. For instance, you have the term for brand new, something that was made out of from scratch. Okay, and that's the word nails. Okay, nails conveys the idea of something that was made out of nothing. And then you have another word, which is the word kainos. And the word kainos is a word that is used for something that is new, but by virtue of a remodeling of something. Okay, for instance, if you take an old property and then you make it new, right? But you're actually remodeling the site or the estate. To give an example, the Temple of Jerusalem. Okay, the Temple of Jerusalem, some people talk about Herod's temple as being the third temple, but then there are those who talk about that temple being the second temple. Why? Because in reality, what he did was taking the temple that was built during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra, and he made it new. He disassembled it, he expanded the platform, and then he embellished the temple, and he made it into a masterpiece. So
It was not actually destroyed by any act of war or anything.
exactly.
And so he just took the existing structure and modified and amplified it.
Exactly. And that's the idea that we get from John chapter 19, because the word that John uses, and also same thing with Matthew chapter 27, he doesn't use the word nails
Kairos.
in relation to the tomb of Jesus. It uses the word kainos, meaning that he took a tomb that was already in existence before and it was renewed. It was cut into the rock, yes, because that's what the Bible says in Matthew 27. But again, the term that it uses there is nails. So in this tomb over here, we see the structure of a tomb, of a First Temple period tomb, but at the same time, there are also hints of a Second Temple structure inside. For instance, the existence of a arcosolium that you see also inside the tomb. But then again, it's important that people understand that we don't make any dogmatic claims when it comes to this tomb. We say it's a possibility that fits the biblical profile. At the end of the day, when people come to see this tomb, they come to see an empty tomb. Yeah. For he is not here, for he is risen. And that for us is the most important thing. He rose from the dead on the third day after his crucifixion. And then after his resurrection, he spent 40 days revealing himself to his disciples, showing physical proof that he was physically alive. So why don't we go inside to see the tomb briefly, and that will be the end of our presentation. Now please mind your head when you go in, and also mind your steps as well, okay? So here we are in the preparation chamber, the preparation chamber or the preparation room right here. Right in this area where, and remind me your name. Shlomo. Right where Shlomo is standing right here. This is where a stone bench originally was, okay? I don't know if you can see it over here, but there is an indentation over here. Mm-hmm. Sadly, we had to put a plaster inside here because people were breaking pieces of the tomb to take home. Wow. Okay, so in order to preserve the integrity of this chamber, we had to put a plaster in here. But without the plaster, you would have been able to see right here a groove that went across this wall over here that was the location for a stone bench that was originally here. The stone bench was here for the preparation of the body, but also for the mourning ritual as well. After preparing the body for burial, after having the mourning ritual, they would transfer the body, and then they would store the body, and then place the body on one of the stone benches. Okay, the benches are no longer in place today because the tomb was modified later on. But originally, the tomb would have had solid benches, okay, or shelves. Mm-hmm. Now, we believe that the tomb was modified in the Byzantine period. We're talking about the 5th century, around 460 AD, when the Byzantine Christians reused this tomb, and they are the ones to leave the symbol that you see there on the wall. Now, this is a symbol of a cross that has the shape of bones. You were talking about bones, right? Right. Because, you know, what they're depicting with this painting or this symbol over here is that, first of all, the bones of Jesus were not broken. And it was in fulfillment of a prophecy that we see in Psalm chapter 34, where it talks about the bones of the righteous, that they will not be broken. But also from a prophetic, a messianic prophetic perspective, they also saw it as pointing to the bones of the Mashiach, of the Messiah. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then above the cross, you can see the Greek letters. Iota, at the top left, you can see Iota Sigma. It will be like the equivalent of a YC, right? But it's Iota Sigma, which is the first and the last Greek letters for Jesus Christus. And then on the right, Chi, like an X, and Sigma, like a C, for Christos, or Christ. So at the top is Jesus Christ, or Yeshua Mashiach, and then at the bottom left, Alpha, and bottom right, Omega, which is a title before Jesus in the Brit Hadashah.
Symbolizing the beginning and the end.
In the end. It's
So
the
that
first
is,
and the
that is
last.
actually
A
original.
gente pode entrar. A gente pode entrar. Bem-vindos.
Is that actually original?
It is,
Yes.
well, it is in the same location, but had to be repainted
Oh, I
over
see.
the years. Originally, there were two. That one, and there was another one over here. But the one that was over here was never restored.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why. Instead, they put a plaster over here to embellish, and they never restored the painting that was there. But we know, based on our historical records of the discovery of the tomb, that there were two.
Estamos saindo daqui em breve.
Yeah. Então, pessoal, a gente sabe que o que tem aqui dentro. Esta aqui é a câmara da preparação do corpo, onde a família preparava o corpo para a sepultura, e também era a câmara das lamentações, onde a família fazia o ritual de lamentação. E depois do ritual de lamentação, eles colocavam o corpo dentro da câmara da sepultura, onde tinha 3 lóculos, 3 lugares de sepulturas. Mas os lóculos não estão mais aqui porque foram tirados no século V depois de Cristo. O túmulo foi modificado em séculos posteriores. Primeiramente pelos bizantinos no século V e depois pelos cruzados no século XII. Mas o que é mais importante de tudo para nós é que o túmulo está vazio.
Sim.
Porque ele não está aqui. Porque ele ressuscitou, como ele falou. Nós cremos que Jesus Cristo morreu na cruz do Calvário. Ele pagou o preço por nossos pecados. Ele foi sepultado, mas no terceiro dia ele ressuscitou. Ele está fisicamente vivo hoje para dar vida nova e vida eterna com ele. A todos aqueles que confiam no perfeito sacrifício que ele fez por nós na cruz do Calvário. E isso é o que é mais importante de tudo para nós. Então a gente pode ficar aqui para contemplar e orar. Não, nós fechamos simplesmente por elementos arqueológicos aqui. É simplesmente uma forma de proteger o que tem dentro. Por exemplo, a pintura que tem lá é uma pintura original da época do século V depois de Cristo. É uma cruz. Acima da cruz tem as letras gregas Iota, Supra e Cipro, que são as letras para o nome Jesus Cristo. Embaixo, na esquerda tem Alfa, na direita Ômega. O princípio, porque é o princípio e é entre foi, que também retorna. Então,
You could see here some of the
yeah.
rolling stones that would have sealed
Yes. Now,
burials such as this one. This
It-
is
and the tomb would have had one.
right.
Yeah. Now,
In
the
fact,
Bible-
not only that, we could actually see here
The track.
the canal, the canalette, which would be the stone would be rolled so as to seal it.
That's right.
And by the size of the door, which is
Well, it's
larger today than what it was back then,
Yeah, this
but-
would have been the original height.
but nevertheless, that stone that we saw there is way smaller than the one that would have been here.
That's correct.
Very good.
So, hence the fact that the stone is not from here.
Mm-hmm.
So the stone belongs to an ancient tomb
But not from here.
that was found in the village of Ai,
Mm-hmm.
close to Bethel, and it was brought to the place so that people would have an idea what rolling stones would have looked like in ancient times. But it doesn't do justice to the biblical description, because according to the Gospel of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 28, when we see the story when the women came to the tomb that first day of the week, they were wondering and they were asking each other, who is going to open the tomb? Because the stone was very large. Okay.
Who's going to roll it to the side for them?
Exactly.
And they came and they
so
saw
it
it
wa-
moved already.
So it was already rolled back. So, but this is just for people to have an idea what Rolling Stones would have looked like. And if you look at it, it looks like a wheel a bit. or like a disc, if you will. But of course, in ancient times, people would have used different sizes, also different thickness as well. Yeah, so the original Rolling Stone was never found. We do not know what happened to the original.
By the way, there are two types of Rolling Stones.
Uh-huh.
And one would have been shaped like this
Uh-huh.
in order to seal off burial sites.
That's right.
And the second type can be seen in many places, large stones shaped more like a ball,
Like a ball, okay.
and they would be rolled down from the top
Okay. Down to the bottom.
down to the bottom and as a way of defense, because when somebody is coming to storm you and you roll a stone like that at him, I mean a stone about this size,
Yeah,
could kill few attackers at once.
that's right. Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting.
And each Rolling Stone has, the logo of Mick Jagger's lips.
I knew that something like that was gonna come. No, I'm just kidding. So in this area, approximately, based on Dr. Gabi Barkai, tens of thousands of ancient tombs like this were found, but only 4 of them still with a rolling stone. So the 4 that have been found are more or less like the one that we see over here in Jerusalem, at least. In other places, I don't know about other places, but at least in Jerusalem, there would have been about this type, but also this size as well. But of course, based on the number of rolling stones that have been found, it's difficult to estimate, the size of the stone that would have been used for this tomb in particular, because we have nothing that we can compare it to. But we see from the scriptures, from what we see in the Gospel of Matthew and also in the Gospel of John, that it was a large stone. It was a large stone. So that's it. There's so much more that we can say. Again, we can easily spend an hour talking about the many features of this tomb, the different archaeological discoveries of the place. But at the end of the day, for us believers in Jesus Christ, people come to see an empty tomb because he is not here, or he is risen. But that's also the story for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as well.
Correct.
And we don't make any dogmatic claims, whether it happened here or there. The point is,
It
the
happened.
tomb is empty. Exactly, it happened. Now, I think it's important also to point out that the place does fit the biblical profile.
Right.
And it's a possibility for the events. So,
Cesar, I want to thank you
no, you're very
from the
welcome.
bottom of my heart.
You're very welcome.
You've done an amazing job, as always.
Very much. Thank you.
תודה שבאתם באמת. וגם אם אתם